Hey folks, welcome to the channel Trickle Down Philosophy, where I look at videos with you. Many of these are reactions, I haven't seen them before, to various topics from science, cosmology, theology, atheistic perspectives, and so forth. If you're new here, please subscribe. Let's keep this thing moving along. But today we're looking at Buddhism. What is it? I'm very curious when I see these videos as to what the different perspectives are, because I learn something new in every single one of these videos, whether they're 15 minutes long or as short like this. And I'm purposely not wearing my baseball cap that I ordinarily, 99.9% of the videos that I do, I wear a baseball cap just to have fun with the Buddhist thing.
When you think of religion, a belief in God often comes to mind. But Buddhism is different. Buddhists don't deny the existence of gods, yet they don't worship one either. So why is that? Buddhism is more of a philosophy, a way of life centered around personal growth, mindfulness, and compassion. The Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama, was a human being, not a deity. He taught that the path to enlightenment is within each of us, not handed down by a higher power. Buddhists believe in karma, the law of cause and effect, and reincarnation, where our actions determine our future lives. The goal isn't to appease a god, but to escape the cycle of suffering by achieving nirvana, a state of ultimate peace. By focusing on inner transformation rather than divine intervention, Buddhism encourages self-reliance and personal responsibility. It's a journey that empowers individuals to seek truth within themselves.
Okay. I am going to go back and watch that one again and then pause it. That came out as rapid fire. I think that was AI developed. Just you can tell by the voice that it's AI and not a real person. But I want to go through this and stop at a couple of points there. Certainly a thing that caught my attention was peace. We absolutely want peace, tranquility. And I don't mean necessarily in the Buddhist context. I mean right here on planet Earth, like in relationships where things go awry or the kids are going crazy or at work, it's this. We just want a little bit of, we always say, we want peace and quiet.
When you think of religion, a belief in God often comes to mind. But Buddhism is different. Buddhists don't deny the existence of gods, yet they don't worship.
All right, so there's gods. All right, Judaism was the first religion, as I understand it, to espouse a belief in one God, like the Shema of Israel. What's that? Deuteronomy 6:4. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. There's one God, and that stood out from the pantheistic, polytheistic world into which Judaism sprang. So let's see. All right, so Buddhism, I'm looking this up here on Wiki, and it says Buddhism, also known as Buddha Dharma, is an Indian religion and philosophical tradition based on teachings attributed to the Buddha. Most people refer to Buddha as if that's his name, and it's not. It's the Buddha. That's how my yoga teacher says it. My Ranjita says it this way, the Buddha, but it's the Buddha, who lived in the 6th or 5th century BCE. So it kind of was right around the time when the famous Greek philosophers were around. Aristotle, well, it started with Socrates, then Plato, then Aristotle. Each was a student of, Plato was a student of Socrates, Aristotle was a student of Plato's, and so on. But they were around in the 400s to the 300s BCE. The historical Buddha is believed to have lived from about 563 to 483 BCE. Buddhism originated in ancient India and is based on the teachings of Siddhartha Gautama. Yeah, there's a little bit about the time frame, but it was certainly polytheistic. But in this context, they don't worship God.
Worship one either. So why is that? Buddhism is more of a philosophy, a way of life centered around personal growth, mindfulness, and compassion. The Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama, was a human being, not a deity. He taught that the path to enlightenment is within each of us, not handed down by a higher power. Buddhists believe in karma, the law of cause and effect, and reincarnation.
In that sense, it's very scientific. Just happens to apply to the individual. But cause and effect, that is a very scientific. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction, and so on.
Reincarnation, where our actions determine our future lives. The goal isn't to appease a god, but to escape the cycle of suffering by achieving nirvana, a state of ultimate peace. By focusing on inner transformation rather than divine intervention, Buddhism encourages self-reliance and personal responsibility. It's a journey that empowers individuals to seek truth within themselves.
Yeah, and I know that's where fundamentalist Christians, and I don't know about Orthodox Jews, but the truth is outside. Like I know for fundamentalist Christians, truth exists because God says something is true, and then you try to glean as much of it as you can, and typically from the texts. I think there's a verse in First or Second Timothy that says, "Study to show yourself approved unto God," which is a complete mistranslation of that. But that's how many fundamentalists and literalists take it, that study these texts, these things that are outside you, and the more truth you get, the more God's going to approve of you. So that was addressed in here in the sense of they don't do things to appease a God. They do it to escape the cycle of suffering, to escape suffering. And so your actions cause an effect. When you learn to live a certain way and think a certain way, you will suffer less. But then there's the reincarnation aspect, which atheists, of course, would decry and just say, well, that's ridiculous. And I understand that. I don't have a problem with anybody who thinks a certain way is just doesn't make sense. But I like the idea of him trying to improve the self, not to appease a God. And that is where a number of folks have this issue. Hitchens himself, he has a lot of problems with religion, obviously, but just to use him as an example, just when you're pointing out the flaws in certain religions, and he seems to like to go after Christianity the most because it is the biggest religion in the world, that the idea seems to be there's this God just waiting to cast you into hell. And not all Christians believe in a hell, but it is one of these things where heaven and hell, if you're good, you go to the good place. If you're bad, you go to the really bad place forever. And there's this God that created this place of torment. This is what some folks believe. So in this life, this proving ground, we're trying to prove ourselves to this God who's kind of looking a little bit skeptically at what we're about. Because firstly, the idea is we're born into sin as sinners. We're bad to begin with. We start with a 0, and unless we accumulate points along the way, perhaps believing in Jesus and that God raised him from the dead and all this, then you get 100 on your test if you believe that. But if not, you're in a bit of trouble. And so our actions are designed to appease this character, this being outside us, rather than for self-improvement to improve our relationships with mankind, with fellow man, and in the process acquiring greater peacefulness and such. And compassion is a big way of doing it. And I write about compassion in my book, Through Lines, that different people are born with different measures of compassion. And compassionist is one of the 9 personality types that I describe in the book, where you're born with an incredibly high dose of compassion. And you can be out of balance because you may not care enough for yourself, but you may care too much about others that you're out of balance, because you do need to be in a certain position in life of strength and peacefulness to care for other people. But compassion is a big one, where when you do have compassion for others, you can identify with their suffering and even help alleviate theirs. So the Buddhist philosophy, I like that. They said it's a philosophy. It's an approach to everything is a philosophy, by the way, because philosophy just involves, etymologically, it means love of wisdom. So, but it involves trying to understand things and working our way through, and then looking at the cause and effect, whether it's in a petri dish, in a laboratory, or if it's in human relations. So, all right, folks, that's it for this one. Please subscribe if you haven't, and have a wonderful day. Thanks for playing along.